Hello, darling.
Hello, my dear.
Welcome. And you are the first in a series. So
thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
It's great to see you here. Now, I know who you are, but a lot of people watching may not know who you are. So go on, give us the blurb.
Thank you. So my name is Ari Wisner. I am a tarot reader and tarot deck creator, primarily a visual artist and illustrator. I'm the author of the Transient Light Tarot and the Trinity Tarot, and that one there, and that's about it.
Now, I first met you, what, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
At the UK Tarot Conference.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's funny because we got talking, and it's one of the reasons I wanted to sort of interview you first before anyone else, because we realized we actually had different but actually related backgrounds, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
In that we kind of both know the sour after effects of coercive religion.
Indeed, indeed, indeed.
So if you are happy to tell me a little bit about your story and your background, and and then we'll kind of talk tarot into that as well.
Sure. In a sweeping summary. So I grew up in a Christian-based religion, quite a separated kind of community religion, and I was brought up in it. I was quite dedicated to it. I got baptized when I was 16, and yeah, I was very dedicated to it. I stuck to it, and I didn't leave it until 2017. Leaving was like a bit of a slow progression. So at first I was removed from the church in 2015, and then I came back and then I took myself away for the second time, and haven't looked back since then. But yeah, it was like a Christian-based religion, with some sort of key differences between mainstream Christianity. So it had its own kind of particular way of being and perspective on the Bible. Quite studious kind of community. But yeah.
I could relate to what you were saying, because people say to me, how and when did you leave the church? And the only answer to that is gradually, and with lots of backwards and forwards, while I was dealing with my own stuff, and also my own sense of guilt and my own lack of self-image, So I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because, for me, and actually this is going to move on to what I was going to ask you, tarot played quite a big part in that for me. Tell me about when you discovered the tarot, and what sort of part did it play in your kind of emergence, so to speak?
The tarot was more about the support on the way out for me. I got my first tarot deck, I think it was 2016. So it was about a year after I had been removed from the church. And it's funny that I bought one, because I hadn't shown interest before. I didn't really know anything about tarot. It was like a vague concept that I had heard of. And I guess I was drawn to it because I'm an artist. It's visual.
Yeah.
It made sense. And I suppose what attracted me to it was there was, in the Pamela Coleman Smith artwork anyway, a lot of Christian imagery. So there was something familiar and something I could relate to. So it was both empowering in terms of not replacing religion, but giving me something that I know had taken away from me. But it was also familiar and used like a religious language that I understood.
Yeah.
So it was a strange kind of thing, because it was kind of like it was like a pacifier at first.
It's always, isn't it?
Yeah, which it isn't anymore. So it's funny how it's evolved. But at first it was like a spiritual pacifier after sort of losing such a central part to my life. A daily practice that was taken. So
and again, I can relate to a lot of what you said, because I mean, my situation was odd in that I'd sort of got into tarot in my teens, then got involved with the radical end of the evangelical church, and then had my church leaders demanding that I brought my tarot decks to them, and they were then torn up in front of me. Mm. And ironically, I mean, it was just one of the most traumatizing experiences. And, you know, when I actually sort of began to walk away from the church, thankfully this was in the infancy of eBay, so I kind of replaced my 3 decks like for like, and they're still 3 of my most treasured possessions. But it was ironic when I started to look through the Waite Smith with the eyes of an adult, and then thinking, actually, hang on, you know, talk about throw the baby out with the bathwater, because so much of the imagery within this deck, you know, is Christian. So, I mean, it's just the paradox of superstitious fear. You know, I think it finally dawned on me that the people that were kind of tearing my decks up actually were just, it was a knee-jerk reaction of fear, not one of knowledge, or, you know, they certainly weren't coming from a place of informed knowledge. So, you know, it's kind of crazy, isn't it? But
yeah, it is interesting, I suppose, whenever someone sees, you know, something from their faith used in a different context, immediately it's scary, because, well, yeah, it can be seen as disrespectful or challenging its authenticity. But that's what I found interesting about the tarot, because on one hand it was like comforting that it was using biblical language, but it was also affirming because it was kind of reclaiming the biblical language. And strangely enough, I feel like it's helped me preserve the good things from that faith. So although I'm not a Christian anymore, I still look at tarot cards, and Bible verses come to my mind. Good, useful Bible verses, because there's plenty of good wisdom in the Bible. And it's interesting that the tarot has kind of helped me preserve that, rather than come out of religion like I'm an atheist, I hate religion, I hate you know, spirituality. Like, tarot helped me preserve like the good that came off from it, because there was some good. There was some good amongst the stuff.
You find when you look back that when I first walked away, I kind of thought I want nothing to do with that. Whereas looking back now, I realized that one of the things that made it so difficult to walk away was that it was this very unstraightforward mix of actually some really powerful spirituality, but mixed in with a lot of toxicity, and, you know, a lot of very powerful and good tools or principles were being misused. So it really wasn't, you know, it sounds as if your situation has been as difficult to extricate yourself from as mine was, just purely for that reason, that you're thinking, well, it was kind of difficult to admit that actually not all of it was bad. I mean, at this distance now, it is so much easier. But I mean, at this stage now, I mean, where do you stand? I mean, obviously, like me, you obviously still hold, you know, a certain amount of spiritual beliefs. How would you describe your spirituality now? That's a good one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think what you touched on there, I'm just rewinding a little bit. I think it's a good point, because I think people, like, it can be perceived as when you leave religion, it's just this kind of straightforward thing of like, I don't believe that anymore, or I want to be free of this restriction or whatever. But it really isn't, because it's something that you've founded your whole life on. So it is it's like a breakup, and the less you hate the person you're breaking up with, the harder that breakup is. And I feel like breaking up with that religion was like breaking up with someone who had been very good and comforting to me. I had to let them go. So although there were some individuals and some actions that were very bad, but speaking in terms of the religion in itself. So I think what's funny about how I define it now, I guess, would be what I've sort of ended up doing is simplifying my perspective of the divine, and this is something I started doing immediately. You know, when I left, I started simplifying the divine. I was like, okay, let's step away from the Bible's perspective or this religion's perspective or whatever, and let's just say, okay, what is the divine in its most basic form? And as cheesy as it sounds, love is the word that comes to my head, and I use love as an umbrella term for all the things that come under life affirming energies. So creativity, courage, honesty, all these things sort of are an umbrella energy of that life force. And I suppose how I see it now is we are all blessed with life. Us that breathe, and as a result, I'm hugely blessed. And I think it's our responsibility to use that energy as best we can. Obviously, there's no such thing as perfection, but use that as best we can to either create or to promote love or to affirm or to, preserve life, all the different things, all the different talents and skills, again, using biblical language, one Christ, lots of members of the body, that kind of thing. So I kind of still, using that skeleton that I did kind of learn from Christianity, I still hold on to. And I don't worry too much about trying to define that further. Like, keeping it really simple really helps. I think of it as there's source or divinity, then there's the world around us, and then there's something in between which we can kind of channel. Like, we humans and animals in nature, I guess, have this ability to take that power, do something with it, and then bear fruit of some sort.
You touched on something really interesting there when you're talking about, like, obviously the divine being love, being creativity, all of those sort of things. But that kind of takes me straight to your work, because I'm wondering whether you actually perceive your creative process in the way that I do, because there is very often a feeling of actually channeling the divine when you're creating. And when I first encountered your imagery, and particularly because this was the first piece of your work that I encountered, that for me, that's actually something that I see in your work. Do you feel it when you're creating it?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And like, it used to feel weird to sort of say that, because it sounds like really special. I mean, it is special, but
it is, but not in a pretentious way. I just think it's very
not in a pretentious way. I think all humans channel the divine. When you love and care for someone, you're channeling that energy. But it just so happens I'm a visual person. I'm an artist, so when I create, I mean, I could create something without channeling, like something like for work, commercial work, I'm making something pretty, or I'm making something sell, whereas work for the tarot deck and for the oracle deck and things like that, I get to create fully for me and to channel things that hopefully are going to be productive and useful and empowering, and that gives me a lot of purpose.
Because you actually trained as a graphic designer, didn't you?
Yeah.
Which again is something I love about your work. It comes through. There's that graphic quality, but it's actually the sense of a graphic designer just being let loose and being allowed to do anything he wants.
Yeah. I mean, after 15 years of like selling other people's products, it's nice to be able to put it into practice in and it took some loosening up, because like I was so used to doing that. I used over lockdown to paint like proper, like, because I did all these illustrations digitally, but over lockdown I painted, and that was an opportunity to say it doesn't matter what it looks like. It's not selling anything. It doesn't have to appeal to anyone. It doesn't have to be pretty.
You're just creating for you with the freedom to.
Yeah, and if that means I want to paint the divine as a big circle, that's what I will do. I'll paint 10 canvases of circles, which I did do. But that was really important and fed into the tarot work as well, like the and the shapes and the forms and stuff. So I think we all have our different talents, and they can be used to channel good, life-affirming things.
Yeah.
And it's a huge blessing, huge wonderful thing.
Because something that's actually struck me about you is you've now produced 4 decks, haven't you? 3 of which are in print. And one is forthcoming.
Yes, 5 technically. I did make one as a private commission for a hotel.
Oh, of course you did. I'd forgotten about that, which I've seen. Now, because what's actually struck me with you is you have actually, in terms of work with tarot, you've been incredibly prolific within a short space of time, haven't you? Because which was this the first, the Transient Light?
No, that was the second.
That was the second. So which was the first?
This one, the Trinity Tarot.
Oh, right. Okay. So that is now published by US Games, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So did that start out life? Did you crowdfund one of these originally?
I crowdfunded Transient Light, the second one.
Okay.
I threw all my savings into it. All £200 in my bank account, and I printed it. And I think I printed like 200 copies, and and then I self-published it for like 2 years before it went to US Games.
God, that's amazing. You see, I admire that because I've never gone down that route. I've not got the courage. You know, I've tried. You know, and everyone I know who has gone down that route says it's like gruelingly difficult but very rewarding. You know.
Yeah.
So it's lovely to see that these have actually had 2 lives, that they've been crowdfunded, but then they've also, I mean, it says a lot about the caliber of the work. They've been picked up by mainstream publishers, you know.
Yeah.
So
I really appreciate it. I mean, yeah, I think the whole process, I think what the grounding of both these first 2 decks, which hasn't been the case with the other ones that I've made, is they were made with no promise of being sold or being popular or anything, which was a lovely kind of freedom, because it meant I made them for me and with no kind of, oh, this is what people want or this is what people connect with. It was just it was following the process that I was doing in my head about religion. So the first deck was all about simplifying the divine, and bringing and seeing the divine within yourself. And then the second one was coming to terms with impermanence, because when you do leave religion, or a religion like ours at least, because a huge part of that religion is, its foundation is overcoming death and finding eternal life. And after I kind of changed that viewpoint, it was like, oh, now I need to embrace impermanence.
Oh, so these decks have actually been a really pivotal part of your journey, haven't they? Not just creatively, but actually in terms of you knowing your place both spiritually, in life, and actually in a way, these are the roadmap. These decks are the roadmap of your journey.
Yeah, they literally document how my view of the divine has evolved, and they lead on from each other, which is kind of nice, because I feel like it's going to be a trinity.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the end, a trilogy, should I say?
A trilogy. It's interesting. Again, we've got parallel experience, because created my second published deck, the Sun Tarot, was specifically designed as a deck for gay men, you know, to reflect their experience. But actually, that was a big part of my journey out of the evangelical church and embracing my own identity as a gay man, but also overcoming my self-acceptance issues. It was through creating that deck that I learned the sanctity of my own sexuality, and that it was something to be celebrated, and it was something that was God-given and divinely given. But it says a lot about the tarot, doesn't it? Because, I mean, the more you speak to deck creators, you realize that actually tarot is a really powerful roadmap, particularly when it's used to mirror your own experience, you know. So if this is parts 1 and part 2, what's part 3 when it arrives?
So I think there's going to be 2 part 3.
I love it.
The first part, I'll say its first attempt at part 3, is the Oracle deck that I've just about finished and is coming next summer.
Yeah.
the reason I say it's not the whole part 3 is because it was a completely different process to create, and as a result, as I was creating it, it wasn't very fully formed, and it kind of merged into something different, something good, but something different. And during the process, I did have a new idea for another deck, which I feel might be more aligned with that third part. And so, if you were to look at the Trinity, it kind of follows that. So the first one is God, as it were, is source. The transient light is God in a temporary vessel, or Jesus.
Yeah.
And the third one is the idea of the Holy Spirit, the idea of the divine, the eternal divine in a temporary body, perpetuating that love and light with roots, which is the Holy Spirit, the gifts of the Spirit, all that thing. So the Oracle deck that I've just done is all about practical, like, affirmations and meditations of, okay, now that we understand this, how do we live practically? And so I'm very happy with it. I'm very proud of it. But I feel like this other deck that I have started making some artwork for, I think it's going to be called the Unity Oracle.
Oh, I like.
And it's the idea of that divine being in everything, and how do you pull it all together and be unified, which I feel is quite important, especially these days. Like, everyone's pushing further and further to left and right, and polarized. And I want to make a deck that kind of highlights that unity is not about being the same. And the beauty of unity is the differences coming together. So I want it to be a little bit more challenging, so it's less of an affirmation. In fact, it's not an affirmation deck. The one coming next year is an affirmation deck, but this one won't be an affirmation deck. It will be a challenging deck that will ask the question, how do we unify? How do we forgive? How do we overcome? How do we nurture? How do we do all those sort of things? But that's early days.
I think that's what I love about your work, because when I got this, in all the right ways, I found it challenging, and I still do. And I kind of love what you've done with this. I think particularly as well, where I think this is really welcome, is that what I really love about this is your take on gender neutrality, because you've really made me look at the cards from a completely new light. I love number 2, there we go. The Revealer, AKA the High Priestess. But anyone can work with this deck. Anyone can see themselves reflected, And it's funny, because I haven't been brave with messing with gender on my cards, because I don't know how to. Whereas to see the essence of each of these archetypes just so beautifully captured in such a direct way, but at the same time in a gender neutral way. So whether you are he, she, they, on a gender bridge somewhere, you will relate to these. And I've loved working with this, because it's kind of challenged my perceptions, but there is also I find an incredible peaceful sense in this deck. And actually hearing you talk about your motivations behind it and the ethos behind this deck, it kind of makes me understand how it is such a comforting deck to work with, without being without it kind of sugarcoating anything.
No, I'm really glad, because like I think that's it's 2 of my energies in one. Like, I'm an Aries moon, and I want to challenge, but I'm a Libra sun. So I do like to promote peace and calm
and harmony.
I want to be able to confront you with a picture of a skull, but without it being scary, you know. And I think it's a way that works for me, and it doesn't work for everyone, but I feel like that was an approach I really wanted to take with it. I wanted it to be calming and peaceful and safe, but not just sugarcoating is a good point. Like, I think like there's a lot of space out there for affirmation. You know, we're moving into a new era of affirmation, which is so important. But I think certain things can get lost when we focus on just the affirmation and not the challenge. And actually challenging ourselves can bring greater affirmation than just repeating a kind thing to yourself. So I think that's why, as well, with these oracle decks, I've had to explore a more affirmation-based route, but I also feel the need to explore a more challenging route.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't find it comforting for artwork or for a book or anything to just tell you how lovely everything is and how lovely you are.
It's not.
You know, or that it's all going to be okay, because it's like, that's not life. That's not life.
Well, you and I both know from bitter experience that is not the case, is it? I mean, you know, not just us. I mean, I know certainly a lot of people that I've taught tarot with, you know, invariably one of the reasons tarot is so precious to us because it's been a tool along the way for an incredibly difficult journey, you know, where certainly, I mean, in my case, probably in your case as well, self-acceptance was bought at a very high price. You know, my sense of spirituality and my worldview were bought at a very high price. You know, I kind of didn't arrive at the place I'm in now without, you know, a lot of complications and a lot of missteps along the way. But yeah, I mean, it kind of just takes me back to how powerful tarot is as a picture book of archetypes and how healing it can be. I mean, again, this is one of the things that drew me to your work. I think you come at the tarot from a similar place to me, in that, you know, if I create a deck, I want it to be a healing tool. This certainly is, you know, and that's what makes it so important. But that is how I see tarot as a whole. You know, it can be so many things. It can be it can be a tool for ritual magic. It can be a tool for reflection. It can be a tool for meditation. It can be a tool for divination. But for me, ultimately, it's a tool for healing, because it speaks truth into our circumstances, sometimes really uncomfortably, you know.
And I think one of the reasons that is the case, that it's so versatile, is because it is a set of archetypes, and as a result, like, however you're using the tarot, it's so broad and you can relate to it. You know, like when I first came to the tarot, one of the first cards I pulled for myself was the Tower, which was exactly what I was experiencing. And so not only was that the card I needed to hear, I needed the tarot to see that in a different way, if that makes sense. Like, rather than just feeling, oh, I'm going through an awful, terrible time, the tarot taught me, okay, this is natural, this is inevitable in all our lives. Probably it's going to happen a handful of times, and it's an opportunity to rebuild. And that's what I find so comforting about turning to the tarot, is, you know, the tarot has experienced something like what you're experiencing right now, because it covers all those archetypes, and it's an exercise for whatever. So if it's healing, it's going to cover all the archetypes. If it's for making a decision, whatever you're using it for, for all those archetypes. And it's a wonderful template and framework for all kinds of work. And I think that's also why I get along with tarot better than oracle decks. Because it is so well-rounded and so full.
I think probably the most well-rounded divination tool there is. You know, which kind of explains why it's become popular the world over, doesn't it? Because it's just so all-encompassing. While we're here, just out of interest, talking about the Tower, I want to talk about this, because, you know, when I saw this, I thought, oh my God, that's uncomfortable. You know, I mean, it's not just not just this. It's like, what a precarious position going on here. So just tell me about this, because it does fascinate me.
So it's one of my favorite cards. Like the Tower is one of my favorite cards, and for me, it was a huge reclaim in different ways. One was that it's supposed to be a dark card, and I've made it my favorite. So I resonated so much with it. And the second one was I used the Tower of Babel for it as well, which for me was a wonderful reclaim of story from that religion. So, because I think there's like when you go into tarot or into other practices, there is always a bit of a guilt or a fear when you relate to something you're not supposed to. You know, for example, as a gay man, the idea of being associated with Sodom and Gomorrah, or like as a humanist, to relate to the Tower of Babel. There's these things that you're not supposed to relate to, or supposed to be like, you know, God destroyed them because they were terrible. And to be able to reclaim that and be like, okay, what can we learn from this now? How can it be useful now? So yeah, it was the Tower of Babel because I wanted to think of how it's almost like the intention was right. The intention wanted to get to the divine. It's just, it was built the wrong way, and it was built out of fear and insecurity rather than out of, you know, proper growth. And it reminds me of when I was in the church, like I was doing all the right things. You know, I was getting baptized. I was taking all those boxes, but it was all out of fear. So it was a diminishing tower that was limited.
We're very similar.
Yeah, but then when you get rid of that, it's like, actually I can go broader and more organically, and I can collaborate with the heavens rather than try to penetrate it by force with bricks. So yeah, and I don't really know why I made it uproot from the ground. I think I definitely wanted to draw attention to the foundations. Like,
I love it.
Foundations. I think I've also always had a bit of a visual obsession with like floating islands and cities. I think do you know what I think it is? I think it was Disney's Aladdin when I was a kid. You know, when they lift the palace up. And I always fancied Jafar when I was a kid as well. I didn't really understand why, but I did. Not Aladdin, Jafar, the creepiest one.
You had to be there, love. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, yes. Oh dear.
It's funny with this because when I first saw it, it's deceptively shocking, because I was when I was working with your deck for the first time, and I drew this tower, and I thought, oh, he doesn't do anything by halves, does it? Because I thought, if I fall off that, I'm not just hitting the ground. I'm like, you know, I'm going further.
Yeah, no, it's nice though. It kind of makes you look deeper, both higher in spirit
and down.
Deeper. They're like,
yeah,
you know.
And I love the fact that actually there is something quite mythical about this. You know, in that it is completely ungrounded. And what I love as well, it's, you know, you've got this inference of either roots or that actually the cosmos is cracking underneath this, which I love. So yeah, you can tell it's your favorite card, and it has significance because it's
my favorite tarot card in general, but it's my favorite out of my deck as well. Like,
wow,
yeah, very happy with it.
You know what? It's interesting though, isn't it? I mean, here we are, we're having this discussion. We've both walked away from kind of repressive religious systems, you know, to the actually, and the result of that being a personal blossoming and liberation and a sense of well-being and freedom that we could have never experienced while we're within those religions. But actually, in both our instances, you know, we were in systems where actually this simple deck of cards was hugely feared, you know, and demonized, reviled. I mean, in my case, torn up, you know, and
hung over. Like,
I'd
be distraught if someone had torn up my first tarot deck.
I mean, it was my blue box Wade Smith, love. I mean, that's the, you know, I mean, thankfully, as I said, I was lucky enough that I could replace it, you know, and thankfully, I mean, I had 3 decks. I had a beautiful 1980s Swiss 1JJ, a Fergus Hall Tarot of the Witches, which was the James Bond deck, and a blue box Wade Smith. Thankfully, I have been able to replace them, and they are, because of what they represent. It's not just that they were my first, but it was actually that whole act of reclaiming like for like. I could live without the bulk of my tarot collection, but not without those 3 decks, you know, because they mean so much. But I'd just be interested to know why you think that tarot is such a threat to established religion. I tell you what, you give me your theories, I'll talk about mine, and then we'll see how they merge, you know?
I think there's so many things that are threatening, and it will be unique for us both. And I suppose the one that stands out to me in my experience, especially with what I was taught growing up, the biggest threat was, well, 2 things. 2 things. One was you're delving into something you shouldn't know. So the perspective I was given of like witchcraft or sorcery when I was growing up was, I don't know if you can hear the cars.
Yeah.
Was not necessarily, it was funny because I wasn't taught that those things were not true. I was taught that these are connecting with the divine in ways that are unsafe or not for us to, it's like not our business. And as a result, it's you're playing with danger.
Yeah.
Which always felt a bit weird to me, just because it was like, well, one, why are those options there? and 2, surely it just depends on your intentions. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
You know, so, and the second big thing for me was the empowering element of the cards, the fact that we read them. That's a very empowering thing, because it leans on your interpretation, whereas the Bible or a book, I mean, supposedly is not about interpretation. Arguably it is. But I suppose that's the difference, is the book has like ultimate authority. That's the belief, whereas the tarot doesn't claim that.
No.
But is very useful. You know, because I've also found this weird journey where like I sort of rejected the Bible, then I relied on the tarot, then I kind of reclaimed parts of the Bible and saw the good in it, and then I also then started to be like, actually, like tarot isn't a new religion for me. It's funny, like I revere my tarot deck, but not because it's God's word on earth. The tarot deck is in me. You know, the tarot is just a physical manifestation of that. Like, if we really wanted to, you could make a tarot, you know, you could do tarot with anything, you know. So
yeah,
I think it's the passing the power to humans rather than to a book which is supposedly not human. I think that's the big threat. It's a different authority. It's a different voice.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's funny because I mean, I come at it from a similar place to you, because for me, I started to realize that it was that self-empowerment that was the threat. You know, you are given this book, which you are told is the unquestionable word of God. And that book is going to tell you how you live your life. It's also going to tell you where your loyalties lie. It's going to tell you who you mix with, how you behave towards them. It's going to tell you all sorts of things that you have to do. And then all of a sudden, I started to realize that one of the reasons why the tarot was so threatening to all the people that had been around me in the church was that this doesn't do that. This kind of mirror, you know, the tarot kind of, it doesn't tell you what to think or what to believe. It mirrors back your circumstances and helps you to understand yourself better.
Yeah.
But also as well, there's certain figures in the tarot that I realized the church really fears. You know, a patriarchy does not like reflections of divine femininity. So the high priestess and the empress, for a start, really are taboo subjects. You know, for a religion that claims to be the truth will set you free and actually makes you fearless. I mean, I've never met such scared people in my life. Pointing 3 fingers back at myself when I was involved in it. You know, immediately they see the devil on a tarot card and it's like, oh my God, that's demonic. You know, and it's like, well, you know, it's like, considering you're supposed to have the vitriol all over this, what the hell are you scared of?
Yeah.
You know, and I don't even think people question that.
Mm.
But there's just immediately where tarot's mentioned within, you know, within fundamentalist religions, it's like demonic, 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 and nobody's asked why. But I think because it challenges the patriarchy, and it also challenges the one true way as laid out through the Bible. And anything that I realize now that, you know, the Quran was equally demonized by the church. You know, the Hindu sacred texts were equally demonized by the church. You know, Buddhist texts, anything that was not the Bible would have been demonized by the evangelical church that I was involved with. And I suppose tarot was just an extension of that, because it, you know, it dares to give you a bit of freedom. And it also, I think tarot is subversive. You know, it challenges, it questions, it, you know, it slaps you in the face. That's why we love it. You know,
100%. I think what I found also very interesting. So I do quite a lot of live TikToks where I do like these short readings for people, and every now and then you'll get someone in the comments saying, you know, Jesus loves you, like you won't get the truth, that kind of thing. And I often address them like on the live, like never in a combative way, because I just think it's interesting, because their point often is, you won't find the truth here, you know, read the Bible. And I like to tell them a little story, because not that I'm advocating for Christianity, but I feel like the tarot actually helped me understand Jesus better. Because what's so funny is that the whole Bible, well, most of the Bible is the Old Testament, which is basically showing us how a law didn't work. The Israelites were given a law, they broke it. They were given another law, they broke it. It was ridiculous. The law ended up being unkeepable. It was so complex. And that was just the way of saying, you can't be pure or divine through ritual or through sacrifice, whatever. And then Jesus comes along and is like, this is how you're good or loving. Instead of playing out these rules and doing these rituals, you have God's spirit of love and kindness and forgiveness and courage and creativity, and you have it inside yourself. And that's exactly what the tarot does. But as you said earlier, like the tarot, instead of going to the tarot for an answer, the tarot helps you find that answer within you. And that's why my first tarot deck was called Trinity Tarot, because it was like, that's exactly the point of the Trinity, was that God is accessible within us. And so it just drives me wild when it's like, it's actually helped me understand the New Testament more. And you know, there's a wonderful verse, I think it's in John 17, where Jesus is the only recorded prayer of Jesus in a prayer to the Father, and he says, "This is eternal life, to know God and to know me." And then he goes on to say, like, God is in me and I am in him, and you're in me, and there's all this like unity language. And that struck me so much, because I was like, oh, eternal life isn't eternal physical life in heaven. He said eternal life is to know God. It's to know his spirit, to know his character, and to be united with that. There's plenty of Bible verses that tell us who God is. He's kindness and love and strength and all those other things. So yeah, if anything, the tarot could help you understand the Bible, let alone, you know, I think it comes back to that fear, because although I think people think it's very admirable to have the strength to follow rules, to actually decide what's loving and kind in each situation and its context is harder. Yes, it's hard to like follow strict rules. It's really hard to follow strict rules, especially when they're impossible. But to actually practice and use your own mind to discern what is right in a situation rather than just a rule book is so much more challenging. And I think that's what Jesus encourages us to do. And I think that's what the tarot helps us to do. There's my long speech.
No, it's
and the TikTok commenter goes, oh, okay.
But also as well, I mean, I think it's made me, while you were talking, it's just made me realize that actually this is one of the reasons why tarot has become popular around the world, and also why you see tarot decks that actually reflect so many different faiths and spiritual practices, because it kind of stands aside from any one faith or creed, doesn't it? And but the principles, I mean, even though the tarot decks that we kind of first worked with, like the Waite Smith, you know, they're filled with a lot of Christian symbolism. So much of that Christian symbolism is actually deals with universal themes that are also dealt with, you know, within other religions, other faith perspectives. And I think why tarot is so uniquely flexible and adaptable. You know, you get something like the Oso Zen tarot, you know, which is dealing with a completely different faith perspective, but at the end of the day, they're still solid tarot archetypes. You know, a lovely deck that I remember sort of coming out when I was in my 30s, I think late 30s or early 40s, was Robert Place's Buddha tarot, you know, where, you know, the archetypes of the tarot were sort of seen through the filter of Buddhism. And it's because what these cards express, it does go over and above any one, you know, any one faith perspective, doesn't it? And, you know, and again, it's kind of it has a universal healing to offer, you know,
which is wonderful, because it's not asking you to. The tarot doesn't stop you from having a faith. Like, you know, people think that, like, if you start using tarot, it means you're no longer a Christian, or you're no longer this, or you're no longer an atheist. And it's like, no, you can use tarot and be an atheist, and yes, you can use tarot and be a Christian. Like, it's not a religion. No. It's just a wonderful, wonderful tool which you can use with or without a religion, your religion. You can use it to improve yourself. You can use it in a spiritual way. You can use it in a practical way. It's just wonderful. We're like Team Tarot. Empowerment, like,
it's, yeah. You can see what's going to happen here, can't you? We're just at 48 minutes, and we'll end up doing part 2 and part 3 at some stage. You know, we've kind of.
Oh well.
Darling, before we go, do that wonderful, you know, sort of available from where all books are sold.
A little blurb.
Yeah, just give us a little bit of guide to what your publications. And because obviously we've got this, which is Transient Light Tarot, which I love. Just buy this man's deck; it's amazing. So, but of course, this is published by Hay House, is it?
Yeah.
So this is very easily available. Trinity Tarot, who's published that?
So Trinity Tarot is with US Games.
Wonderful.
So this is available via them or Amazon and other booksellers.
Yeah.
Same with Transient Light, Amazon, Hay House, and then the new one coming next year, the Oracle deck, which I must be able to officially say the name. Well, I'm going to. I don't think it's a secret. It's called the Find Your Own Way Oracle.
Oh, lovely.
And that's coming next summer, and that will be through Hay House as well.
Yeah.
And I also illustrated Raise Your Vibrations Oracle deck for Carl Gray, which you can get in the same places as Hay House. You can see everything on my website, ariwisner.com.
And we shall put your links in the description below.
Thank you. And that's the blurb. That's the blurb.
Well, it's always a pleasure to chat.
This
has just been fascinating. And if you are game to do part 2 at some stage, I will drag you back into my StreamYard room and interrogate you again. Does that sound all right?
Sounds wonderful. Wonderful. I'll come willingly.
Oh, thanks so much for taking the time, love. It's really appreciated. And thanks to everyone who's watching. We hope you've enjoyed this. That's Ari Wisner. I'm Chris Butler, and fingers crossed we will see you soon. So
Lovely.
take care.
Thank you.